Hello, in this video I will be teaching you how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So keeping in mind that solving means you're finding either the x-intercepts or zeros or roots of a parabola, meaning when a function would hit the x-axis. The quadratic formula I mentioned in the last video, but it is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If we were to read this aloud in words, then this is how you would say it. But notice this time I'm going to substitute the discriminant for b squared minus 4ac. So it says x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant, which is this right here, all over 2a. There's actually a song that we're going to use to remember this, and I sing the song using the tune Pop Goes the Weasel, if you're familiar with that. And when you hear the tune, you'll probably recognize it. So don't think I'm corny or crazy, but I promise this will help you remember it. It goes x equals opposite b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2a. And I'll sing it again. X equals opposite b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2a. So keep in mind that your discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac part that you learned in yesterday's lesson. And again, in order to identify a, b, and c and plug it into the formula, you do have to have your equation set equal to 0. So you need to have your quadratic, linear, constant term in that order equal to 0. One other disclaimer is sometimes you'll solve equations where they'll use a different variable for x. So I'll make sure I practice a couple that have a different variable. That way you're not looking at it like, I don't understand because it doesn't have x. So remember, first step is always to find the discriminant. The other skill that's going to be required in order to do this correctly is to simplify the radical, which is why we had you practice simplifying radicals last week and again on Monday, and also sometimes around the square roots of negative numbers, but we'll practice the ones with imaginary solutions tomorrow. So where I'm going to go ahead and work through this first example with you. I'm giving you the equation 6x squared minus 5x minus 6 equals 0. And again, this is just practice, and just to reiterate, you should take notes on this. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first thing I would do is go ahead and make a list of A, B, and C so that you can plug it into the formula appropriately. I'm going to enlarge this here, raise this up. So I'm going to make a list over here. My A value is 6. My B value is -5. Do not forget to pick up the sign of the number. If it's +6 or +6, then that's cool. But if it's -6, you've got to make sure that your C is, in this case, a -6. So the sign belongs to the value A, B, or C. The next thing you want to do, so that was the first step, make your list. Second step is to find the discriminant. So your B value is -5. Remember to put that in parentheses, so when you put it in the calculator, it will do the math correctly. Your A value is 6, and your C value is -6. So whether you use your Graphing X app or a calculator, either one is fine. But I'm going to type in parentheses, -5 squared. Make sure your square's on the outside. And I'm just typing it all kinds of wrong right now. -5 squared minus 4 times 6 times -6. And I get 169. Now, when I get 169, that stands out as a perfect square. And remember, when we simplified radicals, you should know your perfect square values. Third step is to plug it into the formula and simplify. So I'm going to refer back to this formula right here. And I'm going to substitute into the formula. All right. So, and I sing the song as I substitute, so it helps to make it easier. So x equals opposite b. So I'm going to look over here. the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5, plus or minus the square root of the discriminant, which is 169, all over 2 times my a value, which is 6. So far I have x plus or minus the square root of 169 all over 2 times 6. Now I'm going to continue to simplify that. So I'm going to bring over my 5, my plus or minus, and my 169, if you don't recognize it as a perfect square, first type it in. If you get an integer value, that's awesome. That means it's a perfect square and it's easier to simplify. All over 2 times a, where 2 times 6 is 12. Now, the important thing to understand about what you have now is there are 2 solutions. One of them is 5 plus 13 over 12, and the other one is 5 minus 13 over 12. Well, if I simplify 5 plus 13, I get 18 over 12. And in fact, if you want to take 18 over 12 and just type it in your calculator and hit math, enter, enter. And I'll show you how to do that on the Graphing X app as well. So again, if I'm typing in 18 over 12, if I hit math, I can just tap number 1, which is fraction, hit enter, and it will convert it for me. So 3 over 2. So either way, that means one of our solutions is 3 over 2. Once I've simplified it as much as possible, I'm going to put a box around it because that's one of my answers. For 5 minus 13, if you have trouble with integers, do 5 minus 13 like this. Negative 8 over 12. And I'm sorry I'm running out of room here. But negative 8 over 12, math, enter, enter, is negative 2/3. I'll write it up here. Negative 2/3. So both of these are my solution, and I would have to type in both answers. So that means my x is 3 over 2, comma, and negative 2 over 3. I did part of that wrong. Where did I get? No, that's right. Oh no, overthinking it. I worked it out, but for some reason I couldn't find where I wrote it down. All right, so before moving on to show you, by the way, let me just mention before I finish this, that these are rational solutions. So this is 2 rational solutions. Not that you're going to need that for the Delta math activity. You don't have to do that, where I'm just going to be asking you for solutions. But on the review that you'll do on Friday, I'll be asking questions about like how many roots it has and what type they are. So that'll be important. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and flip to Delta Math, and we're going to do problem number 1. So I'm going to hit C problem. So you'll just pick problem 1. And I'm going to write this down on paper. You will not want to do this without writing it down. So on paper, I'm going to write down that I'm solving a squared minus 7a plus 12 is equal to 0. Then flip back here to my document camera so I can work it out with you. So I hope that you'll practice this with me. So again, I told you that you won't always see x, but it is still a quadratic equation because of the square term, the linear term, meaning to the first power, and the constant. So first step is to write down a equals b equals and c equals. But remember, a is your coefficient of your quadratic term. So that's going to be an understood 1. B is negative 7, and C is 12. So step 2 is we find our discriminant. So remember, if you remember your steps from your prior lessons, you can skip some steps because some of you might be able to go straight to your calculator and type that in, and then you can plug it into your formula. So I'm going to type this in, negative 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12 is 1. This is number, I'm just going to go ahead. So this is 49 minus 48, which equaled 1. So that's my discriminant value. So we start off now with our formula. X equals opposite b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a, which is 1. Now 1 is a perfect square. So I'm going to go ahead, 7 plus or minus square root of 1 is 1, all over 2 times 1, which is 2. And remember, this is going to be broken up into two solutions, 7 plus 1 over 2 and 7 minus 1 over 2. Well, 7 plus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that's one of our solutions. 7 minus 1 is 6 over 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my solution is 4 and 3. So I'm going to go here back to Delta Math and type in 4, comma, and this will pop up. So what this means is these are braces. Sometimes with formal math notation, we would say instead of let me show you. Instead of A equals 4 and 3, you'll see solutions written in braces like this. Now this is not an ordered pair. It's just brace notation for a solution. So I'm just going to go back here and type in 4 and 3, hit submit, yes, and I got it right. And of course it's going to show you afterwards. And you know, there is also the help video option if you need help. So see, they're doing the exact same thing I'm doing. Except this time they're plugging in all the values for the discriminant. So just note that your teacher's preferences here at South Central are for you to find the discriminant first. So you're not inclined to type it on the calculator at the same time and get it wrong. If you do it step by step the way we're showing you, it's easier to get it right. All right, so now I'm going to go show you how to do a problem where you get an irrational solution, which, remember, means if you were to put in the calculator, it has a decimal that does not terminate or repeat. So that means, but we are given exact answers, so you won't put in decimal answers at all for these problems. What you will do, however, is give an exact answer. So if you do get a decimal that repeats, it means that the answer is going to have a square root in it. So let's go ahead and get started. But notice this one here is not set equal to 0. So same skill from yesterday's lesson. In order to get started, you must set it equal to 0 first. So you look at this term and you want to move it over to the side with your quadratic, linear, and constant terms. So if I see a positive 2a, I know that to make it equal 0, I need to subtract it. But I can only subtract an a term from another a term. So I'm going to put it under the a term, its like term. Draw a line. Bring this down to a squared plus 9a plus 3, and that cancels out because 2a minus 2a is 0. And now I'm ready to get started. So step 1, a is 2, b is 9, c is 3. Step 2, find your discriminant. 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. Using my calculator. Remember, if you feel like I'm going too fast, please just hit pause. I do encourage you to try to do these problems without me after, especially this one. Try this one first and then see if we get the same answer. So I got 57. And next I'm going to plug it into my quadratic formula. X equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a. And at this point, I'm going to just do that part in my head. 2 times a means 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is 4. So now I'm going to see if I can take the square root of 57. Square root 57. I get a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. So I'm going to see if I can simplify it in my calculator. So 57 divided by x squared. So I'll write that down. Check in calc. Square root of 57 is a decimal that goes on and on. So we're going to go to y equals and do 57 divided by x squared, just like we did in the prior lessons. And we're looking again on our table for the last integer ordered pair before we get to a y value of 1. Oh, interesting. Well, it looks like when I do this, I have 1 and 57, but I have no more. There are no other options. So what that means is that I cannot simplify the square root of 57 and I leave it. And in fact, because I've already done the 2 times a, which is 2 times 2, and I get 4, I'm done. So this is my answer. And I apologize. I put x equals, of course, because quadratic formula, but in this case, it would be a equals. And I'm done. So now I'm going to go ahead and work problem 5. You have 8 problems total. The first 4 have rational solutions. The last 4 have irrational solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and write this problem down in my notebook. And it's already equal to 0, so I can go ahead and get started. So step 1, a equals 4, b equals negative 13, and c equals 6. Again, I recommend that you pause and work this out and see if you can get it. Step 2, find your discriminant, putting the b value in parentheses, negative 13 squared minus 4 times a times c. Typing it in your calculator. And I get 73. By the way, you will, if you're understanding, get better at recognizing, like 73 is probably, I can't think of any factors to break that down into. So if I take square root of 73, again, I get a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. If I go in here, just change this to 73 divided by x squared. There are no other integer ordered pairs. So that means I can't simplify it. So I'm going to go ahead, except, of course, now it's r. So r equals opposite b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a, where 2 times a, or 2 times 4 is 8. And that's ugly 8. But since I know I can't simplify the square root of 73 because I just tried it, I'm done. So now I'm going to go to Delta Math and type it in. Now this is the interesting part, is you have to make it turn into a fraction. So there's a couple of different things you can do. Let me see if that gave an option. No, I didn't see an option where you could just create a fraction, but this is what's going to be important. So let me show you. In order to type this in, you're going to need to tell the calculator or the Delta Math that all of this is in the numerator of the fraction. So my recommendation would be to start off with parentheses and end with parentheses. That way you can, after this parenthesis, this right parent, you can hit /8. So that's how I'm going to type it in. And I've already practiced it, so it does accept it that way. So I'm going to type in 13. Come down here to click the plus or minus. Then I need the square root of 73, so I'm typing in square root 73. Then I'm going to right arrow out of it, and then hit divided by 8. And it creates the fraction like I want. Now, you can either go ahead and hit submit if you're like, ew, that's kind of ugly, and you just want to take off the parentheses. You can do that as well. But either way, it will accept it. Just make sure over here, if you're going to use parentheses, that you have it on the left and the right. Hit submit. And it's correct. Notice here they don't have the parentheses, but it did accept the solution with parentheses. So either way, but it won't pop up unless you use parentheses after the 73. The fraction bar won't pop up. So just wanted to remind you that. All right, that takes care of all the practice. Let's go ahead and log out at this time, as in I'm going to end the video, and let us know what help you might need, but just 8 short problems today. All right, take care. Let us know if you need help. Bye-bye.